whatever it is, it could be one sentence that said with kindness, that said, "I hope you understand," or "I wanna talk to you about something important to me. Can you listen? Happy to hear what you have to say." How you approach someone, what you say, it can't be undervalued because the way that you speak to someone really matters. If you speak to them with respect as opposed to, "Well, I said it." "Well, how did you say it?" "Well, I let her know." "Okay, well, good for you, but I'm guessing it didn't go well."
Welcome to Good Enough with the Trauma Therapist, a podcast dedicated to empowering you to take control of your life, learning valuable strategies for healing, and looking at mental health through a trauma-informed lens. Get ready to feel empowered and confident in managing your symptoms. And now, here is your host, licensed clinical social worker, EMDR therapist, and certified clinical trauma professional, Jamie Vollmuller.
Welcome to Good Enough. I am your host, Jamie Vollmuller, and today we have Debra Roberts with us. Debra is a licensed clinical social worker, an author, course creator, and public speaker. She is a business consultant and trauma consultant with over 25 years of experience in various settings dealing with working with challenging relationships. Debra developed her communications model, the relationship protocol. Her practical approach is effective for interactions ranging from the boardroom to conversations across your kitchen table. Her new online program, My Communication Tools, is compact yet powerful. It is designed to help you express yourself more confidently, improve relationships, and navigate challenging situations. Debra hopes for a kinder, more peaceful world where we can talk to each other even about our differences. That would make a big difference this year, I think, to make her mission a reality. She made this program affordable to reach more people. Debra, welcome. How are
Thank
you?
I'm great, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
So especially this election season, and I know you're a Long Islander too, uh, eh, people are just very divided. Our country is very divided, and I think it makes it the silos that have been created
Mhm.
is really, detrimental. And I think it hurts a lot of family systems is what I'm seeing. Like a lot of people are really anxious about holidays and barbecues and things because they
Yeah,
don't want the explosion,
unfortunately.
right? So how is this course? Like, can you just let's just get into like how do we explain what are we doing in this course? What's the purpose? Who's it for?
So sure, hi. Um, so I created my communication tools because I realized that we are not talking to each other and that there's a whole generation of people who are not comfortable communicating directly. And even those of us who are older in all different generations, there's no one teaching you how to talk to each other. They don't teach it in schools. Most people didn't have it modeled in their homes. So, where are you supposed to learn this? Because for some reason, there's this presumption that we all just know how to do it. It's a given, like waking up and brushing your teeth. And I think that's why I was mentioning to you before that, I've been teaching communication for over well, a few decades. We'll do that. And I just thought everybody was teaching this in their offices as well because it's so important and it's the root of how we get along, how we show up, how we build confidence, how we set boundaries with people, whatever it is. So feeling equipped does so much for us. And I guess about 6 months ago, I started thinking, really, literally, no one is teaching this. I've been in the online world now for a decade. And I meet people, I do a lot of trainings, I've trained a lot of clinicians and coaches, but also I have a course that's in businesses. And I just see over and over that no one really knows what to do particularly in an environment like we're in. So I created this course because I want us to be able to have conversations around the kitchen table. When you're meeting with a family member, when you're talking with a friend, we don't have to agree. I mean, I have very strong political views. I don't express them out in the world now because I don't need to get shut down. I want to get both sides of the table talking to each other. And that's really the most important thing to me. Um, at this point, because I do think that when we shut each other down, everybody gets hurt. And so the goal of this program is to just build people's confidence to have the conversations that they want to have, deal with conflicts, problems, express themselves more clearly, improve a relationship. It covers so much territory. I also teach self awareness skills in here because you can know how to communicate, but if you're not aware of how you're impacted and how you impact others, you kinda got nothing, is what I like to say. And I
Yeah,
also teach coping skills a little bit in there too. So it's really a well-rounded, and it's designed for busy people, it's affordable, and it's such an important program right now. So mycommunicationtools.com and $79.
that's
You know
amazing.
it's worth so much more, and it's
Yeah,
fast. The lessons are 10 minutes each.
that's less than a session fee, girls. That's like,
I don't wanna
some of
tell
my
you how much
clients,
less
that's
than a
their
session it was for
copay.
me when I had my practice. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. But that's
How
my goal. I wanna get people in seats. I want to get us talking again.
I think that's really, really important. So a lot of the people in our audience are, avid people pleasers.
Mm,
So they're very conscious of what other people it's really the anxiety about like, ooh, what I'm saying is gonna upset that person. So they
mhm,
hold their peace, right?
right,
Like instead of saying what they a lot of them are very empathic and can articulate it in a very nice way. It's just that anxiety of someone else is going to be upset or disappointed with me that prevents them from initiating that conversation, likely because anytime they tried to set a boundary or state a difference of opinion, a lot of our clients have some significant trauma histories. So
yeah,
for those people, are there specific like skills in the book that assist them in
yeah. Yeah, so there's the book, The Relationship Protocol, and then there's the
the
course.
course?
And
Sorry.
no,
Yes.
no, no, that's okay, because in the course, you learn the relationship protocol model. They complement each other. They really do, because the model is, it's the foundation. It's like the Bible of
Yeah.
but yes, in answer to your question. So the program, the book, it all teaches you how to communicate from the basics of how do you approach someone to get the best outcome? How do you show that you're committed to the interaction, to the conversation, to the relationship, even to the organization? And then how do you do something that I call turning towards, where you connect with the other person's experience? How do you do that so that they feel heard as well, but you still get to express what you want to say? And then one of the then so there's this approach or perspective that you learn, which are the two key elements. And then the four steps are: how do you have the conversation? How do you initiate it? And what do you do if it's not going well? What do you do if you have your agenda and you're like, dang, exactly what I thought was going to happen happened. And now I could feel myself getting all whatever. Well, I show you this is what you can say in that moment. You can extract yourself, or you can comment on what you're observing. There's different options about how to proceed, but one reason to go through the program, lesson by lesson, is because there's even you learn all the different components of the model, but one of the lessons is approaching your challenges with confidence. So it'll say you're having a conversation, all of a sudden it's a misunderstanding, and I say in the program, now remember what you learned in step 1 and step 3, you can pull that in here.
Yeah.
So now they start to learn to, and I teach you how to prepare for an important conversation, because if it's uncomfortable, don't just dive in. You're not doing yourself any service if you
No.
don't prepare. And I think that I get why people are people pleasers. I can lean in that direction too. I used to say I'm a fly girl, meaning if there's a conflict, I'm out of here. but but not the same way that J Lo is a fly girl. I mean, I'm like I'm like, "Fly, I'm really out of there." But I think that I want people pleasers to be able to say, "You know what? What I have to say is important. I need to be heard," because ultimately what happens is you either start to resent the other person or you stuff it down, you can get depressed and start getting triggered all over the place, whatever it is. So let's say no more. I want to empower myself. And even if I'm not comfortable, at least I have the tools to start. And I'll say, just dip your toe in the water. Just try one thing. And there's a workbook that you can play with it. Where can you improve your self awareness? Who's the next person you want to have an important conversation with? And there's
Yeah.
also a freebie, by the way, on my website. My website is therelationshipprotocol.com, and there's something called Tell Me What to Say. And it's exactly what you're talking about. There are reasons why people avoid conversations. It's
Yeah.
usually they don't know how to start, they don't wanna hurt someone's feelings, or they're afraid it's gonna go haywire. So I show you what you can do in this, you know, download. So that's one a good place for people to start as well.
I love that. Yeah, and what you're saying is right because a lot of us people pleasers are people pleasers because we were raised in a world where boundaries were bad. Saying no is
Mhm.
bad, doing for yourself or advocating for yourself was selfish.
Yeah.
And a lot of our listeners really, really struggle with that. But you're right. I say that all the time. It leads to resentment of all these people because you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off for everyone and you feel like no one ever addresses my own needs.
Right.
But that's because they don't share what their needs are because they're too busy taking care of everyone else.
Yeah.
Or because they really struggle to just take care of themselves in general. There's a lot of guilt and feelings about even having conversations about
Mhm.
prioritizing the self.
That's right. It feels
Um,
very selfish.
yeah, yeah, and I think it keeps them caught in that cycle of just feeling, not good enough chronically
Mhm.
because there's this perception that other people don't care about you. But
Right.
what I've learned from doing my own work as a therapist and as a client and work with my clients is that most of the time the people in our lives really don't know. Like maybe our parents, maybe that's their expectation for some people, but the people in our adult lives at work or our friends or wherever, they don't know that you feel that way because you don't ever talk about it,
That's
right?
right.
And I think that communication skills and boundaries especially are like so important for that specific population
Mhm.
because they've always shied away from communicating their feelings
Yes.
and needs.
I think that exactly what you're saying is so true because it's like this snowball effect of something that starts out with, I'm not comfortable having that conversation, or I know how this is going to end,
Yeah.
or I really don't like the way she's going to talk to me and I know I'm going to freak out. So why would I bother? It's either going to get me going, it's going to get them going, it's not going to be successful. But at the same time, if you go in and you plant your feet and you are more confident in what you're saying, and it doesn't have to be a speech or a whole diatribe, it really can just be I need to be spoken to differently,
Yeah.
or I when I come home from work, I need a little time to unwind, or whatever it is. It could be one sentence that's said with kindness, that said, "I hope you understand," or "I wanna talk to you about something important to me. Can you listen? Happy to hear what you have to say." How you approach someone, what you say, it can't be undervalued because the way that you speak to someone really matters. If you speak to them with respect as opposed to, "Well, I said it." "Well, how did you say it?" "Well, I let her know." "Okay, well, good for you, but I'm guessing it didn't go well." Or I mean, I used to sit I don't really have a clinical practice now, but I used to sit with people in my office, and God bless them. I mean, I would watch an interaction, and I would literally say, this was my intervention. I would stop and I'd say, I'm sorry, I just have to jump in here. When you just said those things to each other, did you think you were gonna get a good response?" It's like, did you actually think that the other person was going to say, "Thank you for speaking to me that way," or "Thank you for calling me that name," or telling me it's it doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't mean that they're not a difficult person, but at least try to engage with them in a way where they feel respected and they also feel heard, even if you don't agree with them. And so it's a matter of experience, trying things out, practicing, pretending, rehearsing. Get in front of the mirror, rehearse what you want to say, rehearse what you're going to do if it doesn't go well, so that you go in there and you feel prepared. And again, it doesn't have to be a conversation that covers every issue that you're upset about or concerned about. Start with something that's much less, I call it like a low risk conversation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we wanna build those muscles, right? Like, with anything we do in the therapy world, it's like, we're not gonna start with the hardest stuff first, right? We're gonna start with
Yeah.
a person that, like especially with a lot of my clients, like, it's anyone that they have to, like, ask anything from, there's that
Mhm.
such tremendous feeling of guilt where it's like, let's start with the safe people that
Yes.
logical brain knows are
Yes.
not the people that are gonna attack you like that, and then we'll work our way up to some of the people where maybe there's a reason that that's a triggering thing
That's right.
or an anxiety producing thing. Because once you because you're still gonna have anxiety when you're having those conversations initially, but the
Mhm.
more that you it's like exposure therapy, the more that you do it and you're successful, the more your brain and your body believes like, "Oh, I can handle this. I can handle
Yes.
this."
That's
And you're able to, incorporate those skills a lot more easily. I love that you said rehearse too, because I feel like that's something that I say to
I do
clients.
that.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, there's no perfect conversation. This is not an exact science. And I don't even give you a script, but I give you language that you can use, or I'll say use something that sounds more like you. But start a conversation by saying, I want to have a good conversation with you. I want to talk to you about X. And in this program, I actually went further to make it not just about a relationship conversation. What if you have to call your doctor or your teacher? You know, you're in high school and you have to call your teacher and have a conversation with them because you realize that you've messed up something and you need to approach someone, and I teach you how to have a conversation when there's a lot to say, just a basic way to start a conversation with the what and the why, because again, nobody teaches you that, but somehow you're supposed to know how to advocate for yourself and how to express the things that are important to you, and particularly if you're nervous or shy or you've never done it before, how are you supposed to know how to do it? Some people, it does come a little bit more naturally, a little bit more extroverted or more confident, but in general, nobody really is perfect. Nobody is perfect at communicating, and everybody can use some area where they wish they were better, and that's what I wanted to address. Not just the people who feel, "Yeah, oh, I can't talk to anybody," but also someone who avoids conversations with their partner, or someone who we're having a conversation, and next minute I know I'm up here. I am ticked, and
Yeah.
I've now ruined the conversation.
That was me. That was always in my
Reactive.
20s, that was always my fear. I didn't have a lot of conversations, not because I didn't know that I should have them, but it was more like, if they say this, I know that I am not in a regulated body and I'm gonna fly off the handle like a
Right.
lunatic,
Right.
and I don't wanna respond that way, and I'd be like, "Well, until I can get my emotions under control, I can't have this conversation." And I still do that now. Some things still tick me off, and I'm like, "I
Oh,
need a few days cooling period." But it used to be like I was so, before all the treatment and stuff, I was so dysregulated that I would hate having those
no,
conversations
it's
because it
hard.
was just
Well, because also
so
it's hard,
scary.
and you lose your, what you're trying to say, and what you wanna say is so important, and that's when I have so much compassion for what you're saying, because I want you to be able to do that, but I also love that you knew. That's why I jumped in. I love that you knew that you were not regulated,
Yeah,
and, I mean, how cool is that, right? I
yeah,
understand that it's treatment or whatever it is, but I know if I have this conversation, this isn't a good time for me.
yeah.
What's better than that?
That's a rule in my house, since I was 18, and I think that's because I grew up in a house with parents who were chronically dysregulated, and I was like, "I don't wanna be my parents." So,
Mm,
since we were 18, I was always like, "If I'm really angry and I'm saying, 'Give me space,' please give me space," because I know
good for you.
that if you keep poking the bear, I am liable to say some really horrific things that are just coming out of a trauma response that I don't mean, so I
Mhm,
need space. And our my relationship with my husband, our communication has always been great because we really respect each other and
mhm,
we really try to like see the other person's perspective. And I think that's a lot of it. Like I can disagree with people be on total opposite ends of the spectrum, but I think what we have to realize too is like people have their own life experiences that make them just as passionate you are about something
exactly.
in the opposite direction. And they have a whole list of other triggers and reasons and explanations as to why they
Mhm,
feel so deeply about it.
right,
And you're never going to know if you just call them an idiot or
right.
if you're just being
True.
mean and being like, well, you must just be so uneducated and stupid because you feel this way, right?
Right,
It's like, no, they have their own reasons for feeling that way. And from our worldview, that might not make sense, right? Or it could be
mhm,
very fear-based response, but you're never going to educate somebody by beating them down. And it's like
that's right.
really interesting to me that that's kind of how we debate in society. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. It's a matter of turning towards someone and demonstrating an interest in what they have to say and listening, and then making a decision afterward, thinking, "How do I wanna respond in a thoughtful way?" And even if it's to say, "I don't agree with one word of what you said, but I appreciate hearing your point of view."
Yeah.
I mean, they
I
teach you how to get out of if you feel like someone's backing you into a corner too. There's all different things these days. And I will say one more thing. Many years ago, when um, President Trump was running the first time, that was the first time in my entire career that politics came into my office. The first time.
Yep.
Because people had such strong opinions about Hillary Clinton at the time and about, Joe Biden. I mean, everybody, the everything that was going on, and I'd never experienced that before, and I watched this wave that has just continued where couples and families are torn apart by politics and values, and when it comes to value systems and conflicts related to value systems where you're now judging another person because of their views, that's when we run into trouble because oftentimes that's when we turn off. So that's when you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm really turned off here. It's kind of like what you said earlier, Jamie. I know that I'm dysregulated. Well, you also have to know when you're tuning out, and I call it turning away. If I'm
Yeah.
turning away from you, you feel that vibe. You know, I've shut down, like the shade is partially pulled down. So I'm not completely listening to you anymore. That doesn't feel good to you. Why would you want to continue talking to me?
Yeah. Yeah, that
So,
became really, and I think I work with a lot of, LGBTQ youth, so especially around that time, that became a very big problem with a lot, like, where we are on Long Island, we are very Republican, even though we're in New York. Um, so it became an issue with a lot of the parents because a lot of the rhetoric that they're hearing is all of these things about how our teens have been brainwashed and all of this stuff, but
mm,
they deeply believe it, right? And they deeply believe that this is causing damage to their children, and they don't wanna reinforce things, and because of the propaganda that they were hearing, and it
mm,
was very difficult for me as a therapist who is an absolute liberal to, listen to that from parents, but like you were saying, I had to stay, like, very much engaged and just curious, like, that's
yes,
the mindset I put myself in. What makes you believe that this is gonna happen? What is the research that you have seen, and
right,
really trying to understand that perspective
right,
so that I can then say like, "Okay, well, here's other research, and here are other articles, and here are other things that I want you to familiarize yourself with, and you can come to your own conclusion. I'm not saying I'm right
mhm,
and you're wrong, but I just
right,
want you to look at these things because this is the long-term consequence of not supporting this child," right?
right.
Statistically, research-based. And when I took that approach, I've had parents that have been very I had a parent once accuse me of, like, converting their kid to be gay, and I was like, "Yes, me, my straight cisgendered white woman over here. I'm just, magic fairy wand turning kids gay for some reason." Like, no, I'm just just
According
a
to skill
person
set.
that's affirming. But, even that mom, she came around because could see that I was genuinely interested. I was not shutting her out. I
Mhm,
was not, like, downplaying her or villainizing her. I was like, "I very much understand from a parent's perspective that you feel like something is wrong and someone is, like, brainwashing your kid, or that,
right,
his peers are I get it." And it was, like, she wasn't a bad mom, she was a good
mhm.
mom. It was just all of the
It's
anxieties about
scary.
what's being told to her,
Yeah,
and the only way she was gonna listen is if I sat there and listened to all of that mumbo jumbo and then was like, "Okay, here's an alternate perspective. Here are some resources for you to look at. And here's like one technique that I want you to try that sees if it just changes the dynamic in your household," and doing things like that. Like, but putting it on her to you make this decision.
mhm,
Because what and I think that's really important for everyone because that's part of the siloing that's happening. And it's not
mhm,
just on the right, there's also siloing on the left.
mhm,
I'm one of those people that I watch Fox and I watch everything so I can kind of piece it all together and be like,
mhm,
this is probably where we are in the middle somewhere.
mhm,
Because it's all misinformation or exaggerated misinformation when it comes to politics. But I think that understanding, if you really want to understand why your family members feel so passionate, it's really important to try to understand what information that they're seeing, or how those policies affect them. Like, my brother's an NYPD cop, so he is very Republican, and we have debates quite a lot, but they're always very amicable because my brother knows that I'm a bleeding heart liberal and that I still protect police rights, and I would in no way want my brother to be in any sort of harmful situation, and I can be rational on both sides. And he has his views, but we can talk amicably about it, but I think that's because there's that care there that you were talking about,
Mhm.
that understanding from the beginning of the conversation that you are a human that I genuinely wanna connect with, that I genuinely wanna
Mhm.
work things out of with and understand, and without that, foundation built, there
Mhm.
can be no real conversation.
Yeah, and that foundation, you're talking about a relationship that's been long-standing with your brother, and that foundation applies to a conversation with someone you meet at a meeting or a party. It's the same it's the same foundation.
Yeah, it's just that level of mutual respect and trust, and I think that's so very important, and I
Right.
think that because because issues are so polarizing right now, it's very easy to feel very triggered and
Mhm.
be like, "I am just gonna tune this out," like you said, or,
Mm, right.
like, respond very aggressively because that's where I am in my body in the moment,
Mhm.
but that doesn't help anyone to move forward or progress. And if our families want to be more cohesive and learn how to talk about difficult things, because politics is not the only difficult thing. I mean, there are plenty
Mhm.
of like, even myself, my viewers know that I've had infertility issues. I had to talk to my family about a lot of, like, "Hey, please stop asking these questions
Mm,
because it's causing me a lot of anxiety," and that wasn't an easy conversation to have because I know
right.
from the perspective of my family, they were just like, "We're excited for you," and I'm like, "Yeah," and every time you say it, it's a dagger to the heart, right?
Yeah, no pun intended.
But they
Right.
wouldn't know that if I
Mm.
didn't share that.
Right.
So there's plenty of conversations where you just need to have them.
Yeah.
Have them.
Yeah, and I wanna give you the tools to have them.
Yeah, and what do you specifically, Deborah? Because I heard you say you do corporate America too, and I think where I really honed in on my
Excuse me.
ability to have to learn to regulate, even when situations were really triggering for me, was when I became an entrepreneur because
Mm,
you cannot, like, I had a first hire that there was a lot of conversations that were triggering and I ignored, and it
mhm.
ended disastrously, and I was like, "Okay, we can't do this again." You gotta just have those
That's
conversations
right.
and stay in a regulated body because you can't ignore when you're the boss. But it's a disservice to the company, it's a disservice to that employee as well,
Yeah.
because then they don't know what they need to do, or they might not even know that they're doing something that's so triggering to you that
Mhm.
you can't stand being around them.
Yeah.
So do you do work with, like, what is the work that you do with
Companies?
entrepreneurs in corporate America?
Sure. So, I have done consulting for many years. I've given talks, but I also created a program for companies, and it could be for nonprofit organizations. They've actually taken the lead lately, but nonprofit organizations, small companies, Fortune 500 companies, and this is an 8-lesson program that teaches them how to bring up conversations, how to lead, how to approach someone. We call it the prerequisite to all other workplace trainings, and the reason for that is that's my little subtitle. But the reason for that is if you think of it logically, where companies are required to have certain trainings for equity, diversity, and all of those kinds of things, which are so important. But if someone is working in an organization and someone has been treating them poorly and they want to file a report, if they don't have the words or the confidence to say what's on their mind, they're never gonna do that successfully, get a good response, and if the person, the manager or the owner, department head, whomever it is, if they don't know how to receive that information well, then that training really served no purpose except to inform. And I wanted to get into these companies and help them to gain a language, which is a practical, logical language for how do we run a meeting so we all feel heard, so we give each other the benefit of the doubt, so we can resolve conflicts quickly, reduce stressors, increase productivity. I've gone into Fortune 500 companies and worked with teams of hundreds of people because the leaders are seeing others as like sort of impeding what they want to do instead of seeing that they have a different agenda, but that you all have the same goal. And that happens in nonprofits between, development and service. And it happens in big companies and small companies where if we don't trust the people that we work with, and I use trust loosely, but you know what I mean, that we don't fully trust their intentions,
Yeah.
then we approach them differently, we get protective, and the conversations are much more, of a struggle for everybody. You're making a
Difficult.
face, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, part of the reason I opened up my own private practice is I was so tired of the nonprofit world, and it was that I disagreed with a lot of the ways that leaderships ran
Mhm.
things, and it was like, do what we say, and they didn't care for our feedback, and
Dysfunctional family.
yeah, and it was very bothersome to me because I'm very much I run my company like this, like, everyone I have a team in New York and Missouri. My Missouri team is very confused by how, like, open I am with everyone and how genuinely I want feedback because it's foreign to them.
Mhm.
I think my New York girls have been with me for long enough, and a lot of them I knew before I opened a practice, so they just know me as a human, so it's less foreign to them, but anywho, it became very important for me to get that staff feedback,
Mm,
especially as I pull back from seeing so many clients and start doing more of the operations and supervision
right,
because they know what the issues are, right? They're the
right.
ones on the front lines. If my receptionist is saying, "Hey, there's these kinks in intake," and I'm saying, "I don't care, do it my way. It's better for me for KPIs or whatever." It just creates a lot of frustration, and they
Mhm.
have good ideas, right? Like, I had tons of good ideas, and when you're
Mhm.
in that problem, it's easier for the person in the problem to sometimes problem solve and be like, maybe this would be better for our clients, or
Right.
maybe this." And if leadership doesn't listen, it just makes people feel so undervalued and unappreciated.
Yes.
Like, my girls are not the highest paid by far, but they all love their jobs because they feel like they add they're valued and they're taken in account for, like, where we wanna go with our mission, and their
Yes.
ideas are, like,
We're
actually
in this together.
discussed, yeah, and that's so important, and I don't understand why more businesses don't run that way because it's so
Yeah.
much more efficient. Your
Yes.
employees are so much more, like, happy to be working, which is just gonna be better client or customer service because they
Mhm.
actually enjoy their jobs and what they're doing.
And they feel cared
Um,
for. They feel like they matter, and everybody has to feel like they have a voice and they matter, and that's what you're saying. I will say that I watched a documentary about, the making you may have seen this, I just saw this on I wanna say Netflix, I'm not sure, it was the making of Pretty Woman, the movie Pretty Woman with
yeah,
Julia
yeah.
Roberts and Richard Gere, but the focus was on the director and how he, was so Rob Reiner was so or Carl Reiner, now I think the dad was Carl, but anyway, he took a joke or a line or feedback from anybody, from the craft service person, from somebody on his team, and they would put it on a Post-it note, and they would just put it on his little table, and if he liked it, he'd stick it in his pocket, and if he didn't, he'd throw it on the floor, and then the next day, you could give him another joke. He didn't care where it came from. He
Yeah.
wanted the best for the film, and that's what this is about. I thought that was such a great analogy of someone who there was no ego involved in our work. It can't be, and I think the same thing in business, that we have to make decisions for the sake of the company. And that's what I talk about. The bigger picture is what's most important in our personal life, that for the sake of the relationship, we do certain things for the sake of our children, for the sake of our job, for the sake of the company. And how do we all do this together? How do we show up in a committed way and express ourselves in a way where, and I don't mean, this panacea, I'm just talking about people working together and feeling like they are going to a job or turning on a computer every day and someone notices and checks in and has some type of connection with them. It's that connection that we're all looking for and feeling heard and that we matter.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in our fields. I'm like, I don't understand how most places are not run like this, but
You know?
we forget because it becomes like, well, and I get the nonprofit world too, right? It's a lot of regulation, it's a lot of anxiety about like, okay, we understand that this is not working, but this is what we're required to do by some, so there's a lot of complexities, and I don't want to badmouth my fellow colleagues because I think that everyone truly does the best they can.
Mhm.
But even when you just take that feedback and are a little more open to it, your employees are going to feel more heard, even if
Exactly.
you're explaining, "There's nothing I can do." And I've had to do that as an entrepreneur many times. Specifically, we used to take all insurance because I'm a big believer that everyone should get care, but I can tell you from doing that,
Mm.
doesn't work on Long Island when you have an in-person practice that's highly specialized, where you wanna pay your employees a living wage. I can't take Medicaid
Yeah,
and still pay our bills and
that's right.
actually pay myself anything.
Set 'em.
So,
Yeah.
we had to come off that, and if I had that approach of like, "Well, this is a decision and none of your input is really valid and I don't care," right? I would have lost a lot of employees. But
Mm.
we had many discussions about what everyone's concerns are, where their clients are gonna go, making sure that there's a transition period,
Right.
all of those things because it does matter to them because they do care about these people and
That's right.
they wanna help people and it was hard for a lot of my employees, but they also were like, "Yeah, but we do wanna make more money." And I'm like, "Well, here are the numbers,
Here's the
guys.
dilemma.
This
That's
is
right.
what we gotta
That's
do."
yeah.
So it's either, we live like nuns and take a vow of poverty, or we're gonna have to,
Mhm.
redo the way we do things and aspire to be a nonprofit someday, which is still in our overarching plans is like, we're gonna make a nonprofit branch and help domestic violence survivors because 'cause we're all super passionate about that.
Yeah.
Um, but when you keep people in the loop, everything any change, because transitions are hard
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah.
It just makes it so much easier.
One of the things I'll also add, um, the communication protocol is the, business program, and when every participant that takes the program that works at an organization or company, they take a benchmark assessment in the beginning, so it's just for their eyes only. It's sort of them giving this self-reported, how do you feel about your self-awareness level, comfort communicating, comfort dealing with conflicts, so to speak, and everything they're going to learn, and then they get a report to their email address, just saying, "Well, this is what you're gonna learn in the program, so awesome," good stuff. And then at the end, they take a progress assessment. Again, self-reported progress. The first half is how much improvement have you made in these areas? And the second half is how do you feel about working at the organization? Do you feel appreciated? Or um, would you recommend your organization to others? Would you go above and beyond? And then we take those and aggregate, and they get a report as well, but we take an aggregate of all of the answers, no identifying information, and we give the administration, the people who signed up for the program, we give them a report, a company summary that shows them the progress that was made. I want them to see where their dollars were spent, first of all, and the improvement that was made in all these areas. But I also want them to know what is the feeling, the experience of the people that work for them, and they can't get that information anywhere else. So the company summary really tells them, "Hey, we're doing really well in this area, but in this area, we need to make some changes." So really proud of that too. It isn't just a program. And I also created the relationship protocol at work model because it's different than the interpersonal model. So they learn it's a little bit of a tweak of the same foundational components, but it's work oriented, which is I always say it's a little bit more formal, but it's superficial. And it's a little bit more, can we move on from this? Sure. We're not living together. We don't have to have an emotional conversation about it or how you feel about it on a deeper level for the most part in most organizations. It's really more, hey, what happened and can we get past this? That type of a thing. So I teach it's to the lowest common denominator all the way to people who are great communicators around issues so that your organization can flourish as well. And I want people to have that feedback. But that's a much more it's not an involved program, but it's much more comprehensive. The new personal program is quick and easy. It's for people to do on their own, at their own pace. Um,
How long is the new program that's for, like, just everyday
hey
individuals who
everybody.
wanna communicate better?
Yeah, I created it for busy people. So the lessons, there are 10 lessons, and they are literally 10 minutes each. Some I think there's 2 that might go to 15 minutes, but I'm not sure. So the lessons are 10 minutes each. You learn about self-awareness, and you learn about poor communication and how it does impact our life and how widespread it is. And then there is, my model, which has 6 components, and each component has its own lesson. And then it pulls it all together, talking about conflicts and how to address common challenges, common problems. But now you've learned all these different ways of thinking. And it's a lot of what I teach are mindset shifts or little action steps. It's very actionable. Everything you can start using everything you can start using right away. And then the last lesson is called, I think it's My Tools, have become Your Tools. I don't even remember the exact name, but it's okay. So now let's say you take the program and you feel like you have a setback. It's not working. What can you do? So it's looking at, it's all stuff I taught as a clinician. And then some coping strategies for when you're stressed or overwhelmed or you need to calm yourself down. So I'm trying to cover all the bases to make people feel equipped, a little more resilient, give them personal agency. That's a bit I mentioned that in the program. I mean, who uses that expression in a program? But that's what I say. We all need to feel like we have some control over our life. And that's what this is about. If I give you tools, even if you feel the least capable and you or consider yourself a poor communicator or someone who's completely overwhelmed or you lose it every time you have a misunderstanding with your partner and you can't break that cycle and it's the same misunderstanding you've been having. We all do it. I do it. Everybody does it. Guess what? I have simple solutions that really can make a difference. And everybody can do it as long as they want to. You have to put a little effort in. The whole program in total probably takes, I think it's about 2 hours and 15 minutes. And then there's a workbook that you download. I made it really simple. It's like 3 to 6 questions that you answer. How do you apply that lesson to yourself? So where can I use this information? We also did this thing, and people can opt out of it if they don't want, but we give you 30 days of text messages to just saying, "Hey, did you do it?" And, "Did you turn towards someone today? Can you make somebody's day better?" Just different things as reminders. And there's also I teach you how to check in with yourself to expand awareness. So there's a check-in journal that's a template that you can keep. You download those things and they're yours. The whole program, you have access for 90 days, but the workbook and the check-in journal, you download it and it's yours forever. So it's good stuff.
That is good. Well, I think that self-awareness piece, I love that that's a part of the program because I think when hindsight is 2020 in communication, and I think that's a lot of right? That's a lot of it. It's like, if you're not self-aware, and I think you said this earlier in the program, how are you going to facilitate a good conversation? Because at least for me, like, I have no poker face ever.
Me
Um,
neither, by the way.
so, like, if I am not aware of how I am feeling, um, that's a problem because it's written all over my face. So
Yeah.
what's coming out of my mouth and my facial expressions and my body expressions, and I'm a person that's, like, hypersensitive to other
Yeah.
people's micro expressions and body language. So I know how important it is for me to, like, present in the same way that I am attempting to communicate, right? But if
Yeah.
we don't have that self-awareness, we basically just sabotage that whole conversation because you could have said
So true.
everything right, but
So
they can
true.
tell on your face that you're either mad at them or angry or upset or something is off. And that alone, I think the thing is, you'd probably know this better than me, Deborah, but it's like 70% of what our brain
Oh, what
registers
we see.
is
Yeah.
the nonverbal, right? So um if that self-awareness isn't there, right? They're only really they're 70% of their brain is like taking into account what you look like, how you're standing,
Your
your
energy.
tone of voice, all that other stuff. So
Yes.
your words are way less important if that is not congruent and doesn't match up.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And also, you can use self-awareness if it doesn't go well, trying to look at, well, what was going on? Because we can only control ourselves. I can only control how I show up, how I speak to you, and how I react. So afterwards, if it doesn't go well, it's why did I get so upset? Or how did that go off the rails? And understanding it for myself or having a conversation with the person, a kind, intentional conversation by saying, "I don't like the way that went. What do you think happened?" And tolerating it, not getting defensive, taking it in and saying, "Let me tell you how I felt during that conversation." Sometimes if you're brave enough to have that conversation, you can learn from that or just to be able to say, I mean, I teach about halt in this, about halt, hungry, angry, lonely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's part of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there are conditions that exist where we don't function at our best. I'm sure someone in the program could explain it a lot better than me. I've been talking about it for years. I'm not in the program, but I created something called Halt Plus. I took liberties with it because I believe there's more than hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I believe it's also when we're caught off guard, when we're stressed, overwhelmed, or not feeling well, that we can behave differently, that we don't always function in a way that we're most proud of. We go back to old familiar patterns or we do things that are dumb, whatever it is. So I want you to be aware enough to know where you are at before you're having the conversation. I want you to have a sense of, I'm feeling grounded, I'm feeling stressed. Oh gosh, this is not a good time for me to have a conversation. I'm exhausted. And so it's conditions in their extreme. And knowing yourself, really knowing what's happening for me right now. Oh my goodness, I had 2 meetings, one after another. No wonder I kinda jumped down that guy's throat, or when I got on the phone with that person, or I came home and I wasn't as patient. Whatever it is, we kind of need to know where we are at in that moment so that we can function in a way that makes good sense for us and the people in our environment as well. So that's part of the self-awareness too. It's absolutely knowing when what you're saying and what you're experiencing are, in sync, but also it's learning, and I love the learning part. That's why I included a check-in journal so that
Yeah,
you start to see patterns and themes, and it's great for therapists to use with their clients, so and
for
that's
sure.
why I made it affordable. I don't want there to be a barrier to people's success in feeling more confident, so
Yeah, we do a lot of work with people that have childhood PTSD and
mm,
chronic anxiety and issues of that nature. And a lot of that is going back and finding those patterns because they'll say, I don't know why I'm so anxious, but it's like, but it's
yeah,
there. It's there. If we really look at like there's themes and patterns, if we start to journal and take account of all
that's
the
right.
things that are triggering us, it might not be surface level easy to figure out, but if you do
Mhm.
it over time and you really are asking yourself, like, what does all of this relate to? Where do
Yes.
I feel that in my body? Where is that coming up for me? And
Mhm.
are there themes around different types of intense emotions or
Mhm. Mhm.
explosions or
Yeah.
things like that? It does. It's so critical for the therapy process. So I would love for my clients to we have worked journals and things like that for them
Yeah.
too. But it's very, very helpful in just recognizing your own patterns. And I think that's a lot of it with communication is, recognize because we have patterns in our own communication styles,
Mhm.
right? Like, I know for me, there have been times in my life where there gets to a certain point, and like you said, I'll just switch off. Like, it's just
Me too.
switch,
Everybody.
not there,
I'm done. I'm out.
yeah, and I think if you know you're gonna have a difficult conversation, knowing what those trigger points are before going in, so
Yes.
that you can work to really either take the extra time to lay that foundation of,
Mhm.
"Hey, I'm really like, this is a tr" even if I've said this to people before, like, "This is a hard conversation for me to have, and I am very upset right now," or, "I'm feeling very, like" it's more when it's like I feel like someone's hurt me because that's
Mhm.
always been hard for me in my life to tell someone about that, but I've also found that if I don't tell them and they are a person that I care about, it's gonna keep happening until they know that it's hurtful, right? So it's super important even though it's super uncomfortable and you know that the person doesn't mean to do that. And I've had to do that even in the past year of like, "Hey, I this is your behavior. This is how that behavior makes me feel. This is a very difficult conversation for me to have." And I usually start with this is a very difficult conversation for me to have because I love you and I know you love me and I know this is not your intention, but I
That's the
need
key.
you to hear what I'm saying
And that's
because
Yep.
I know you don't want to hurt me, but doing this over and over again is hurtful and it brings up all this stuff for me. And sometimes I don't have the solution before going in, but a lot of the times if I go in with that of this is how what you're saying is or doing is making me feel,
Mhm.
I want your perspective on that. And then let's try to come up together with like an alternate thing that we can do if we're both feeling triggered by this. And sometimes that's just like coming up with a word like buffalo or pineapple, right? Like when you see the sign of that happening again, so you could both kind of like recalibrate and not make the same mistakes again and sometimes it's just like I think for me when people try to problem solve, when I vent, it makes me very frustrated. It's like, "No, no, no. I have solutions. I just need to vent sometimes." Like, I just
Right.
need to be like, "Ah, this is annoying." And sometimes like, my grandma is a big one with that because when I was a kid, she used to problem solve for me a lot, but that made sense. I didn't have as good critical thinking skills when I was, like, 15, 16 years old, but as a 34-year-old woman, I have pretty good critical thinking skills. I have all the solutions. I'm very good at problem solving, but every once in a while, I just need to call someone and be like, "Today sucked."
Yeah.
Um,
I just wanna
you
vent.
know?
I just
And
wanna
just
tell
telling
you.
her like, "Graham, like, I love you, but sometimes I need you to just be like, 'Yeah, that sucks,' instead of being like, 'Be positive,'" because that was always her approach, and I needed that back then, right? I was super depressed. I had, like, SI and self-injurious behavior, so my grandma was always be positive, but that was protective then. But
That's
now it's like, "I don't need to be positive. I just need you to validate that sometimes life sucks, and it'll be better tomorrow, but just commiserate with me for a second here."
yeah, yeah. Well, I
Um,
think to your point, it's sometimes we have to have those conversations and do the 2 things that you did. One is you could tell them up front, "I just wanna vent. I don't need you to fix."
yeah.
Um, or and what you said, "This is really hard for me, and I don't think this was intentional on your part," because that cuts through them feeling defensive when you say that up front. And I talk about that in the program in general because that stops so much of us from talking from the heart because this isn't I'm speaking vulnerably and they're fixing, or I'm speaking vulnerably and they're defending. It's like, oh crap, now we're both in trouble. Versus, you know what, this is a hard conversation for me. I just want you to listen, or I just want to vent, or there's something that happened that I need to talk to you about. I'm not blaming you. I'm not giving you a hard time here. You don't have to feel defensive as much as something's concerning me. I don't think it was intentional, but I have to get this off my chest. You don't even have to give as much as I just said, but
Yeah.
that's the key. Now you've prepped it for them and you have a much better shot. I'll add one more thing. I have a column on Inc.com, and a while back I wrote an article about the 4 archetypes, and I included it in the workplace program, but the 4 archetypes that tend to irritate us and, cause stress, and one of them is the fixer for sure. So it's really knowing the kind of people in your life, and is it someone who likes to take control over things, who and how do I need to address them so we can have a more productive and if they can't do it, then they can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the time, at least in my life, like I'm clearly a people pleaser. So people pleasers tend to be fixers, and that is something that even myself I need to be mindful of. Um, Not so much with clients because it's not my job. I know that from years of being a clinician, like not my job to fix your. In my personal life, though, it's always been very hard for me not to jump into that role.
Mhm.
And be just even being mindful of that's my own pattern of like how other people could be frustrated with me, right? Because even with my sister, like my baby sister Allie, sometimes I get in that role with her, but I could tell just by her tone of voice, right? Like something will
You
shift in her,
want
and I'll be
no
like,
part of it.
and I'm like, I'm sorry, Allie, I'm not your therapist. I'm gonna shut up now, and you can continue, and I'm gonna stop.
Right.
Because I think that that self-awareness too, if even just learning that about ourselves,
Mhm.
is really important because then it tells you why other people might be frustrated from you or backing away from you. And again, like you said, most people aren't good communicators, so they're not gonna bring that to your attention. They're not gonna
That's
be
right.
like, "Hey, um,
That's
I
right.
love you, and I know you're trying to help me, but you're overwhelming the shit out of me right now." So they're
By
not
the
gonna
way,
do that. So if even if just like journaling, like you were saying before, it can help you be mindful of some of the errors in communication that you tend to get into, not just with
Mhm.
the other people. It's like how you approach certain things. And I know for me, as someone who has always been like the savior or the rescuer, the helper, or the fixer, the Pollyanna that has to make everyone happy all the time, that is definitely, especially when it's like uh a safety concern. If I feel like it's a safety concern with someone, then I'm like, "Rrr," especially in my personal life, it's like, ooh.
Mhm.
But I know in those situations now from doing my homework that I need to be like, okay, I need to ask them what they're looking for. And for me, because I
That's
know
good.
I have the tendency as a fixer, I'll say, hey, who do you want right now? Do you want me to be your sister and just say like they're,
Mhm.
just like root for you, or you want me to be your therapist and help ask you questions to help you figure this out? Or do you want me to be your, what Jamie do you want to show up in this conversation? Because I wear many different hats for many different people. And sometimes how I want to help is not how that person wants to be helped. Right.
That's
So
right.
I think even that and just asking, what would be helpful for you to
Exactly.
hear from me in this conversation? How
Mhm.
do you want me to show up for you right now? Do you want me to like come and help you find solutions, or do you want me to just like let you cry and be like, "I'm sorry, baby girl," which is very hard for me.
Mhm.
Which is weird. It's probably because like I said, my grandma was one of those people that was just like pick yourself up. So
Mhm.
it's kind of how my brain is wired. It's like, okay, we're just going to pick ourselves up. But sometimes we need to sit in that sadness.
Mhm.
Sometimes we need to just sit in that, like, life sucks. But, Deborah, it has been wonderful, dear. So I know you put your website out there a few times, but one more time for our listeners,
Sure.
where can they find you for your course? Where can they find your book? If anyone in the corporate world wants to work with you, if there's a different website, let them
Mhm.
all know, girl.
All right. So the website is The Relationship Protocol. That's also the name of my book. And then the personal program is called My Communication Tools. And you can get that off my website or go to mycommunicationtools.com. And that's the new suite program. And the workplace program is called the Communication Protocol. And that is also off my website or thecommunicationprotocol.com. And if they'd like the freebie, it's also on my website. And you just scroll down
Nice.
a little bit, and it's called Tell Me What to Say. And it gives you just some helpful tools for having the conversations that you want to have that you might be avoiding. So, yeah, happy to help and happy to support people and just trying to make communication accessible for all of us so that we can all have conversations that we should be having.
Love that. I'm gonna leave that in the show notes for you guys. The free links, her websites, all of that will be in our show notes for you guys, so
Thank
you can
you.
very, very easily access it. 79 bucks, guys. That is a steal. That is a steal for a course on communication skills. And
And it's gonna be an
communication
app.
is the primary thing that you need to start making changes in your life because if we're not
Yes,
using our voices,
yes.
nothing's gonna change.
Can I add one more quick thing that just happened, hot off the press? My
Sure.
communication tools is going to be available soon in the Apple Store, as an app and in, Google Play Console, also as an app. So for people who prefer an app, or you can, register online, download the app, and do it in both places. So that's super cool.
That is super
Just
cool.
happened, so it's exciting.
Ah, alright. We're gonna have to ask you about an update on that. I'll
Okay,
have Christy follow up with you, but
okay.
thank you guys for joining us today. I hope you, got a lot out of this conversation. I know I did. Thank you, Deborah, for being here, and I wanna remind you guys that you are good enough. Till next time.
Thank you for listening to Good Enough with the Trauma Therapist. We appreciate you listening. While our host may provide some personal and professional advice, we want to remind you that this show is for entertainment purposes only. Each individual situation is unique, and Good Enough is not a substitute for mental health treatment. If you need a therapist and are located in New York or Missouri, feel free to reach out to us at liendr.com or resilient-mo